meeting of the Trust. Happy New Year, everybody. Apologies for absence for this meeting. I have Ali Bolton, Helen Cobb, Karen Deeney and Brian Webster Henderson. Are there any other apologies for absence for noting? No. Are there any declarations of interest for this meeting? No. Minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on the 5th of November have been circulated for approval. Sarah, you picked up a couple of errors in those which we're going to tidy up. Do you want to mention what they are at this point?
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful, Andrew. So I will just so I think there was a typo under the update on our placement under the National Oversight Framework, where it said we've been rated as segment 2, whereas actually I believe we rated as segment 3. So that needed to be updated. And I also noted under the 3A's report that I presented for Quality Assurance Committee, it noted that KD Ned was attending the learning response group, and actually it's Keith Robinson, so KR Ned. So I just asked for that to be updated. Thank you.
Smashing. We will update the minutes of this meeting will reflect those corrections. Any other comments on the minutes? If not, are we happy to approve? Yes, thank you very much. The action sheet of matters arising from the minutes has been circulated. I think most things will be covered apart from Helen. Is there anything you want to say about clinical strategy, which is on the action tracker?
Yes, so thank you, Chair. So the plan will be to bring a further update to the next board meeting in terms of sort of next steps and how we're progressing against the goal.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, we're now turned to patient experience. Lynn, would you like to pick up and say?
So first of all, I'd like to welcome Mrs Hatfield to the Trust Board. Thank you so much, Fran. I know how difficult it must be to come and talk about your husband's experience. And I'd also like to thank Lynn for supporting and Annette putting this together. I have said to Mrs Hatfield, if at the end of you know, the session and what you want to say, if there are any unanswered things that you feel are unresolved, we will take it. We'll meet outside the meeting and see how we can resolve those. So this is about your husband, the 79-year-old gentleman who was admitted in September after a fractured hip. He needed 6 weeks rehabilitation, but deconditioned quite a lot during that stay. Had an witness for was under supervision, enhanced supervision, but the nurse turned away for a period, and Mr Hatfield fell and fractured his femur. Needed to go to theatre, and then was, after extensive rehabilitation, ready to go home from a physio point of view, but then had to stay several days, and then sadly passed away while still in hospital. So we've invited you here because I think the coroner advised you needs for you to come along and talk to us about your experience. So I'm going to hand over to you to say what you want to say, and then we'll reflect back at the end what needs to happen.
Life wasn't easy with John post-meningitis, but we learned to cope with it together. And the day he fell at home was the day after I came back from Canada for my niece's wedding. And I still feel guilty about that because I left the room and I did tell him to sit in the chair, but he didn't. He got up and he was going for the remote on the low table and leant too far and lost his balance and fell. When he was in the hospital, slowly but surely he lost the ability to communicate because of his deafness, that in the end it becomes natural to them to shut down. And so his body started to shut down. He lost nearly 4 stone in 3.5 months whilst he was in the hospital. And I have photographs of him on my phone the day he died, the day before he died, and a couple of days before he died. And most people don't want to look at them. They say, we look at the day, the one you took of him sitting in the chair waiting for the ambulance, but we don't want anything after that. And that is the shame of it, that he came in here as a patient and was, as far as I'm concerned, neglected throughout his stay. So that in the end, body shut down. There's nothing going into the body for the last 5 or 6 days and nothing coming out of the body for the last 5 or 6 days. And it's a hard thing for his 3 children. He's got 6 grown-up grandchildren and 2 younger boys. It's a hard thing for them to accept that granddad is gone because of the hospital's lack of care. And that's the way I look at it. It's lack of care. That's the shame of it. And I'd like to see a change all across every ward or department to uplift that lack of care, because I was quite appalled that he came in as a reasonably fit man and he went out of here in a box.
Lynn, perhaps obviously the patient story has been circulated to members of the board, so everyone's read that. Could you talk us through some of the actions that the trust has put in place, and then I'll ask board members for questions.
Yes, of course. So first of all, I'd like also to thank Gabrielle for the time she spent with myself talking through many of the issues that we've discussed. We have spoken at length, and it is difficult to share these things. I'll just stress one point, because John's stay was more complicated than the story does actually portray. So John went back to theatre 4 times. And he had removal of his prosthesis, and there was a lot of extensive surgery. So it just says here he fractured his femur and had a hemiarthroplasty. It was far more complex than that, wasn't it, Gabrielle?
Yep.
And the deterioration was marked. He did deteriorate over them 3 months. It was definitely
But the worst deterioration was after the
fall. It was, yes, absolutely it was. So some of the actions relating to Mr. Hatfield's story. This, we implemented, it says here we implemented a mandatory supervision rota for Observations Bay at the start of each shift. That was in place. It wasn't that we didn't do that. It was just that it had lapsed into something less formal. So now the nurses were allocated who would be in which hour, and it's written down on the board who will be doing, and making sure that nurses aren't in for too long so they don't need to leave the bay for the drink and look for somebody else to take over from them. And that has been completed, and that is working well. That works well. And like I say, it wasn't that we weren't doing this. I will stress that the coroner did say that the nurse not being in the bay was probably a minimal contributing factor, didn't she?
Yeah, she
And
does.
given all the evidence, because I was at the coroner's court with Gabrielle. Reinforcing the enhanced care document standards, because when I did the investigation, the enhanced care risk assessment wasn't completed. However, the care was in place that would have been required for that assessment. So it was John was in an observation bay, and there was 24 hours observation. That is what would have been flagged by the assessment. There's quite a lot of work going into flagging which patients require enhanced care. I was just on a meeting yesterday with Lorna Britt, talking around the nurses, not the nurse in charge doing the assessment, but more about the care plan feeding awareness of who is on the enhanced care. That's quite complex to talk about, but that isn't being left to lie. That is something that is an ongoing piece of work. The yellow lanyards, this is hit and miss, and I won't pretend it isn't. We have got the yellow lanyards. Sometimes the nurses put them on, sometimes she's forgot to put them on, sometimes they're hanging there. I think the fact that we've had the nurse in there and we have a tighter system of making sure who's allocated that bit is more important than the lanyard. They're relevant, but I don't think that makes that much of a massive difference. Developing a local protocol for staff breaks to ensure continuous patient observation, that was part of the initial work. And then the enhanced care observations, all of our staff on the ward have had enhanced care training. There was a little bit of a lapse, I think we're down to 60-something%, but all of our nurses on the ward have had enhanced training. And the deterioration and the loss of weight, think you'd mentioned to Annette that you weren't aware of the patient partner care programme where you could have been. No, and that I'll be honest, that does surprise me. Because if that wasn't in place, the butterfly system was in place and Onward wards, they are very articulate in caring for patients with dementia and encouraging family to attend the ward with a very fine line, which we mentioned the other day. If you say, oh, you can come in and you can look after your husband, sometimes that feels like a pressure when actually there's been an awful lot of pressure at home and lots of care demand. So them actions have been put in place, amongst others, encouraging families to speak to the nurse in charge if they have any questions or concerns. We spoke about that quite a lot, didn't we? And there is very clear notification on the ward, isn't there? And I asked you to go, asked you to go and check on that. Very big poster that asks questions, concerns. You speak to the nurse in charge, and it's at the desk and it's on the front door. Because that struck me as well. How you explain that to me?
Yeah.
I'll just cover some of the other things that Gabrielle had mentioned to us. Gabrielle, you were quite focused on the cobalt prosthesis. Cobalt prostheses are not, because Gabrielle felt that the prosthesis that was used by Mr. Sharma was a metal-on-metal prosthesis, which would have caused the infection that John ultimately got. The cobalt prostheses, they're not discontinued as such, but the cobalt with nickel and chrome implants are commonly used both nationally and internationally. For example, the stem and the head of the hemiarthroplasty are made from these materials, and there's been no demonstrable link to increased infection rates. Gabrielle was thinking of the metal-on-metal bearing, and we have spoke quite a bit about this. Total hip replacement, which historically encountered some problems, and they are not in use in our trust. I think you still feel that the prosthesis chosen, I think we've spoken just this morning as well, the prosthesis, you felt that probably contributed towards the infection. I think the very fact that so much surgery was undertaken.
After the insertion.
Yes, after the insertion, and then the dislocation, and then an open manipulation of the prosthesis, and then the eventual removal of the prosthesis. So the amount of interaction, surgical interaction there, and how John had deconditioned, they're just two key parts, but there were multiple things that would have contributed to the infection as well. I'm not saying you're wrong, Gabrielle, but I don't think it was the actual prosthesis. It wasn't put down to that prosthesis. We've mentioned that Mr. Hatfield had the cochlear implants, and we needed you a lot to help us with them, and we weren't always successful with them at all. And I think that just demonstrates families' involvement and how important that is. Some nurses got it really right, and some didn't get it right, and it wasn't consistent, was it?
No, I could tell who put them in and who.
I know. And I encouraged the notepad, didn't I?
Yeah.
And even when they were in, sometimes Mr. Hatfield couldn't hear us very well.
Well, that was the first time he had a left and a right.
Yes.
The other ones you could put either one in either ear.
And I've said to Gabrielle, I've got in our resource pack now how to care for cochlear implants. We're still going to rely on families. They're not going to read a 6-page self-care. We're still going to rely on families to help us, and they're not very common. I think I've probably nursed 2 or 3 patients in my whole career with them. And then Gabrielle quite rightly mentioned that the speech and language therapist had been with John when the observation nurse left. And you mentioned, didn't you, Gabrielle, that you felt that if that speech and language therapist had gone to the desk and said, I've finished my assessment now, it would have prompted somebody to go in. And you talked about assigning an outbook, didn't you, for the ward?
I do think it is important that anybody from another department comes into your department, that they say they're there, and then when they're leaving.
Yes,
Because otherwise they left John in a very compromised.
they did, on the edge of the chair,
Yeah.
and he fell forward. So even if the nurse had been in the bay,
She'd
chances
never
of her
reached
stopping
him.
the fall.
She'd never have reached him.
So I'm just going to go through this. We've talked about this. This isn't news to Gabrielle. But we've talked about this with the senior nursing team. I've spoke about it with Chris, the ward manager, and the band 6 nurses, the clinical leaders. The suggestion regarding checking in and out of the ward by clinicians is fully understood and appreciated, given of John's situation, position. And as promised, we've discussed the situation with the senior team. There are several reasons for not altering the process on the ward and insisting clinicians sign in as they leave the ward. I'll just quickly go through them. Ward 2 is a very busy trauma ward with several specialities and professionals visiting all patients across the day. It would be very difficult to police a sign-in book, and even if signed in and out of the ward, there's no guarantee that the nurse in charge of the team of the patients or the nurse in charge would be spoken with or would be handed over to. Many professionals do hand over following their patient review or assessment. However, they may leave the ward if it's very busy and a senior nurse is unavailable and document their assessment in the EPR. This is acceptable and recognised practice. Having a sign-in system and with the prevention of harm being the aim, would spread the responsibility across multiple staff members and increase the overall risk of harm. And providing enhanced care supervision provides a clear responsibility and expectation across each shift for observing patients and does not remove the risk of, sadly, Mr. Hatfield's situation. Ward 2 have had only 2 falls in the last 12 months. None of those resulted in harm. So we do have quite a robust system in place, and we've spoke about this. I'm not just saying this to yourselves now. We've spoken about this. So I understood what you were saying.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm just going to turn to members of the board now to see if there's any questions. Story. We've got some. Sorry, Lynn.
Just a follow-on question really. So one of the things you talked about, exactly when I met you outside, was around learning lessons, and it comes very clear in your in the patient story. So I just want to ask about the wider learning from this. So I know that this has been a clinical incident, and I know you've done the investigation and it goes to harm-free care, but just some explanation about how that wider learning is shared between the nurses and the AHPs.
Well, straight away, the ward was shaken by what happened. So it was widely discussed at the time. And like I say, we had a lot of the systems embedded and it failed for John's situation. So it wasn't more of learning, it was more about reinforcing what we're expected to do. I think we had a very interesting conversation the other day. I think we acknowledge, and this is widely discussed, I've just come out of a meeting with Emma Fitton now, widely discussed the disconnect that can happen on a ward with the clinical support workers providing all of the care and the registered nurse. I'm not criticising anybody. This is the trust. This is every hospital in the NHS. I'm absolutely sure. Your registered nurse is almost task orientated to get everything done and to document everything in an electronic patient record. It's very time consuming. And your clinical support workers are providing a lot of care. They're knowing their patients. They know who wants a cup of tea with three sugars in. They know everything. And because of the pressures of the registered nurse and the intensity of the work with the patients of the clinical support workers, there is a disconnect that can cause some big issues, like nutrition, like falls, skin, looking at skin. And I'm talking about this. You trust me, Lynn, if you hear me.
So I suppose that's my question really around, Emma leads the harm-free care work, and that just some assurance that learning is going to go through that harm-free care forum, so that there is, wider discussion and wider learning, particularly around enhanced supervision.
Yes, and it is because it's coming into all the other things. It's coming in as part of the safe and nursing care tool. It's coming in as other parts. So my personal responsibility is to make sure I keep on emphasising this gap and how we need to try and bridge this gap, if you understand.
I'm going to go to Sarah Rees, who's one of our non-exec directors who's online. Sarah.
Thank you. Hello, Mrs. Hatfield. I'm Sarah Rees. I'm one of the non-executive directors on the board, and I chair the Quality Assurance Committee. So first of all, I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for the experience that you and that your husband have had. Your husband, obviously, in particular, but you as his loved one. And yeah, I'm really sorry that it's happened. I'm really grateful that you've come to board to tell us about it, and so that we can try and hear it and learn from it. So I just wanted to say that first and offer my condolences. I feel really disappointed hearing some of what's been talked about, actually, if I'm honest, because we know that we have the processes and the systems, and we know what we should be doing. And I'm sorry, I don't know who the person is sitting next to you who's been talking about the care on the ward, so apologies to her. But sorry,
Lynn,
I'm
back.
sorry. My name's Lynn.
Lynette.
I'm Lynn Dack,
Yeah.
and I'm matron for the Surgery and Families Division at Furness General. I do apologise. I should have introduced myself.
No, don't apologise, Lynn. It's absolutely fine. It might have happened and I missed it. So, but Lynn, thank you for the way in which you've supported it as well. So what really struck me is we've talked about the things that should be in place because we've agreed them, like enhanced care, like safer nursing, like doing our assessments. But we have that gap between what our systems and processes say we are and should be doing and what actually happens. So the outcome of that is unfortunately what's happened to Mr. Hatfield. So I have a question, which is probably not for you, Lynn, directly, but for our colleagues about, so how can we seek more assurance? How can we do better at closing that gap between what we should be doing and what actually happens on the ward? And how, I guess, as non-executive directors, can we be more assured about that to make sure that these things don't keep happening? So that was my first question. And then my second one was around the deconditioning and the way in which Mr. Hatfield lost so much weight while he was in our care. That's a profound weight loss over a relatively short period of time. And my question really is actually, how are we monitoring that health and the condition of that our patients are in while they're with us? Because that level of deterioration, I would imagine, would be quite a red flag for us in terms of the care that somebody was receiving. And Mrs. Hatfield talked about actually it being neglect. So how are we monitoring that? And are we doing something differently as a result of what's happened to Mr. Hatfield? I'll stop there. But Mrs. Hatfield, I just finished by saying, at Quality Assurance Committee, we do receive reports on the fundamentals of care. So things like patients who fall in our care, the nutrition that they receive in our care, whether they receive pressure ulcers, whether they develop pressure ulcers, and whether they develop infections as well. We know there's a lot of good work going on, but we don't always get it right. So it's something we continue to look at and try and have assurance around, and we will continue to do that at Quality Assurance Committee. I want to assure you of that.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Lynn,
Yeah. So I suppose that was my question to Lynn about harm-free care. So we do have a professional forum where so this sort of incident would be discussed and the wider learning. We also have, we all have all the must audits, etc. But it's unfortunate, isn't it, that sometimes things like this happen, whether it's because of business on the ward or a disconnect between CSWs and RNs. And we need to take that and have a wider discussion at Harm-Free Care about that particular issue, I think, because that's not something that we've actually had highlighted for a couple of years now, because we didn't talk about it a few years ago. So I would personally pick that up and make sure that that's a wider discussion and a piece of improvement work. I don't know whether that answers your question, Sarah.
That's helpful, Lynn, and I think if that could come back to Quality Assurance Committee as part of the next Fundamentals of Care report, that would be really helpful. I think my second question was around that monitoring of patients in terms of weight loss and deconditioning, and how we would know that somebody was deconditioning and therefore we needed to support them in a different way.
So so the process is that patients have an assessment on admission, and then they have to have that redone every 7 days, and there's dietitian input. So I would need to go to Lynn to answer that.
So obviously, Mr. Hatfield was in bed for 6 weeks, wasn't he? So weighing would have been extremely difficult to monitor his weight. He was, please correct me if I'm wrong, he was down quite a lot, wasn't he? His mood was low and his appetite was definitely.
Yes, but that all came from the lack of communication on the ward because of the cochlear implants.
Okay.
It is very easy. You can read other people's stories on cochlear implants and how they do fall down the system because people don't bother.
Okay.
And I think that was part of his problem as well, that there was only a few healthcare assistants who was involved with him. Without them, his life would have been just total hell. And the one thing that struck me was I was sitting with him one day when one of the consultants came round, did bed number, whatever it was, 13, 14, looked at John, looked at the chart and he went, oh, he's dead, and turned and went to the patient opposite.
No, that's a
Didn't say a thing to my husband, didn't try and communicate with him or with me. And that was only about 4 weeks before he died. And I thought, well, if this is an example of what he's going through, God help him when I'm not here.
Yeah, the nursing, we do very clearly identify which patients need assistance with their food. I know, and nurses do.
Yeah,
sit
this
with
was a
them.
consultant doing a walk.
I know. I was just trying to balance the nutritional.
Yeah. But
I think you raised a really important points around cochlear implants. So Lynn, you've already said we don't come across them very often. But when patients do have cochlear implants, we need to be very, we need to be very focused on making sure that communication is good. Well, anybody with problems with this.
Yes.
So again, that's something I personally.
and
Ask them to
basically,
look at.
all you have to do is stand in front of them, get their attention, and they will rely mainly on lip reading if you speak slowly enough.
I agree, and it's understanding the independent communication of every single patient,
Yes.
and that's what we are supposed to be good at. That communication. So
Supposed to be.
I'm saying supposed.
I want to bring in Sarah again, and then our lead governor, Susie, to ask a question. Sarah.
Thank you. It relates to the communication point actually, so that's helpful. I can't remember if a learning point related to the cochlear implants is embedded in the action plan, so that's something we might consider, and whether or not there's some additional communication that needs to happen around that. The second thing was we receive summaries of patient complaints and concerns at Quality Assurance Committee. We don't receive individual detail, we receive a high level report which tells us about themes, and we know that the second highest theme in terms of complaints and concerns actually relates to communication, attitude of staff, etc. And that's something we've been asking at Quality Assurance Committee, and I think at People Committee as well, in terms of how are we addressing that. We had confirmation at the last Quality Assurance Committee that the patient experience team is going to be developing a piece of training and development for staff, for front-facing staff, around communication. This is something that has been asked for nationally, but we have also asked whether that's a piece of work that would include our clinicians as well, and I don't not just our nursing and support staff, but also doctors as well, and we're waiting for a response on that, because it does strike me, Mrs. Hatfield, obviously this is there's the deterioration on the ward, but also the way in which your husband was communicated with or not communicated with, whether by nursing colleagues or by our medical colleagues. So I think it's really important that we make sure that we consider if there's any learning for our medical colleagues as well in that.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Susie.
Profound, not just sympathies, but empathy, Mrs. Hatfield, because I'm a governor, I'm
Yes.
a lead governor, because my husband died in RLI, and I'm therefore committed to make things better. That's why I'm here. The Care Partners programme, I was very much involved in it. In fact, I wrote the leaflet. Probably wrote the leaflet. Yes, I'm very much committed in this next year to make sure that everybody not just knows about it, but uses it, because I don't think it is as embedded as we'd like to think it is in our wards. And it does make a tremendous difference, an absolutely profound difference. I've seen this. So therefore, I think that's something that, you know, like I make a commitment to you that this will be something that every loved one, every sort of partner coming in with somebody in hospital is aware of this scheme we have, which is fantastic.
Yes.
It should have meant that you were there all the time. It should have meant that you would have known that you would be therefore helping with feeding and things like, you know, all sorts of things. It's a very good system. We know it works. We've got to make sure that it's actually absolute universal and used all the time.
Thank you, Susie. Nicola.
Hello, thank you very much for bringing this story to us. I am also a non-executive director. I'm the chair of the audit committee. My profound sympathies to you and your family for what you've been through. I'm very pleased with what Susie has said because I have a lot of experience of being a carer, regularly visiting loved ones, frail loved ones in hospital. I think we do need to take some responsibility and learning from the fact that you were not aware of the programme and how you could best engage with it. I think we have to be I recognise that our staff work under hugely demanding and pressurising conditions, but equally, as a loved one, life can be very challenging when you've got somebody under those sort of circumstances in a bed in hospital. And it still is our responsibility to make sure that you are furnished with all the information that you need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Any further questions? Ms Hatfield, can I thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming along today and sharing your story and telling us about John. You have my profound sympathies for what happened and my assurance that we will learn lessons from this. Obviously, Lynn has set out the action plan, but we want to continue going on learning. It is so important for this trust and for all trusts to learn lessons from experiences where we didn't get it right and we have to do better in the future. But thank you for coming along and your bravery in
Thank
coming
you for
along
having
today.
me. Thank you. Good luck. It'll be a long, hard road, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much, everybody. We've slightly overrun on timing, but I think that was important because that was an important story to hear. So I'm just going to take item 94, my chair's report as read. Any questions for me? If not, thank you. We will move straight on to the Chief Exec's report, item 95. Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I won't read out the report clearly. I've just put out a couple of highlights and happy to take any questions on anything that's in there. So National Oversight Framework, we are in the third stratification of 4, so not 3 as it's abbreviated to. Within that, what I'll do is, of course, NOF's a construct that we've had in the last 12 months. So we are getting better at disentangling that aggregate score and being able to see the domains. It's 31 domains within the NOF score, and how we are progressing against either ourselves in a trend basis, against our submitted plan, or against benchmarking with other trusts. So it's important. It covers the 4 domains, obviously, of people, safety, quality, access, and finance. And we will bring back, as the quarters evolve, further detailed information so we can really see how we perform in the National Oversight Framework. The National Maternity and Neonatal Investigation, we look forward to welcoming Baroness Amos and her team in 3 weeks' time. The various preparations are underway, sharing of data, documentation, and it's really encouraging that when, and I say this in the best possible way, when Baroness Amos and team do come, they don't want to see very much of us. They want to see people who are either service users in the population, have been previous patients, current patients, and our staff delivering care. So I think there's a maximum of an hour over the 2 days where the team want to meet with the senior leadership, but otherwise they're with our doctors, nurses, therapists, managers, midwives and others who are delivering care here. As I understand it, currently we get a letter within a couple of weeks of the visit, just as a kind of rudimentary, we've been and is there anything significant? And then obviously then it's reflected in Baroness Amos's report later in the year. The Provider Collaborative Board is an item later, so I won't cover anything of note here. CQC inspection reports, really importantly, we are expecting the 5 reports from the inspections which happened over the summer, 3 in our maternity units on all 3 of the hospital-based sites, and 2 for our urgent care in Lancaster and Barrow. We're through the factual accuracy pathway for 4 of those, just tying up the final one, and we will wait. Certainly in this quarter, I expect those to be published publicly, and we are encouraged, strongly encouraged in some of the instances by the reports, and we'll look forward to seeing more about that once they are public facing. Level 3 critical care services in Furness General Hospital, as the board's very well aware, of the temporary suspension of level 3 admissions now around 16 months ago, and the public facing engagement around the ICB's intention to make that temporary solution permanent. The work goes on in that space. We expect the ICB, as I currently understand it, to take that to their board in March to make a decision around the need or not for public consultation. In the meantime, we continue with the clinical model that's in place, the monitoring of safety and experience, and importantly, engaging with our staff and colleagues around level 3 care, but actually level 1 and 2 care for our most critically ill patients. Our financial challenge we will cover when we get to the finance part of the integrated performance report, but so this is not the numbers for the finances, it's more our kind of engagement and communication. So we are we've made some decisions in the face of a really quite stark financial challenge, and you've seen the board has seen our communications to staff around what we're doing with vacancies, long-standing vacancies, our pay rates for temporary staffing, the work we're doing on overspending cost codes, and indeed our bed base. I think, as I acknowledge in paragraph 25, these are difficult decisions. They are balancing the 4 quadrants that we're responsible for in terms of safety, quality, and use of our resources, and of course the people domain and it's fair to say that these are difficult decisions to make. There's certainly even more difficult decisions to receive for colleagues that are out there delivering care. As you would expect us to be honest, I think in the last couple of hours I've put a further communication out this morning to colleagues around where we are as at the start of January, some further decisions we need to make, and acknowledging that those are extremely difficult, with our forever caveat of not broaching a red line of safety for staff or patients, but accepting that the experience of our staff and patients may not be entirely as we would wish. Otherwise, Chair, I don't think there was anything else I was going to cover, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Interim Chief Executive? If not, we'll turn to item 96, the lead governance report. Susie.
Yes, I think really all I'll say is take it as read. We have had some quite interesting discussions. We had a pre-COG meeting the other day, which was quite intense. And I know we've got COG on board this afternoon, which I think is going to be well welcomed by the governors who will be able to come But as the rest, as I said, Peggy just read, any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Susie? If not, we will move on to item 97, which is the maternity assurance report. Can I ask our interim chief nurse, Lynn Wyatt, to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So unfortunately, Sue Foyle is sick today, so Alison Mayer has attended at very short notice to present the reports. There are two sections to this report. One is the maternity update report, and the second is the maternity incentive scheme year 7 report. And Alison's going to take them separately. Thank you, Alison.
I am.
Key
Thank you, Lynn.
points.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. So in terms of the maternity update paper, this provides a concise oversight of maternity and neonatal service performance, risks and improvements across Morecambe Bay as of December 25. I'd just like to draw your attention to the following parts of the paper. Within the strategic progress, just like to make you aware that the maternity strategy is being refreshed to fully integrate neonatal services and align with the national 3-year maternity plan. The final version will be presented to the board in early 2026. And the newly strengthened perinatal leadership team aligned with NHSE guidance is now in place, providing clearer clinical leadership and improved multidisciplinary collaboration. In relation to risk and governance, the CQC draft reports for all 3 sites have undergone factual accuracy checks, and the final reports are awaited from CQC. The National Maternity Investigation Team, led by Baroness Amos, are due to visit Morecambe Bay on the 27th and 28th of January, and staff support and communication measures are in place in preparation for that visit. In terms of improvement programmes, also just to make you aware that the Maternity Safety Support Programme ends in January 2026 and transitions to the new Maternity and Neonatal Improvement Support Team. Morecambe Bay will continue to receive enhanced oversight until the independent investigation concludes. In relation to quality and safety insights, there's been a number of achievements within the data set. Several indicators have returned from special cause concern to common cause variation, and these include term neonatal admissions, unsuccessful inductions of labour, shoulder dystocia and service deflections, noting that our stillbirth rate shows sustained downward trend and is below the national average. However, the challenges still remain, and they show that inductions of labour delays still remain, with 12 in September and 20 in October. We now have a new verification and triangulation process in place since November, and a first full report will be due in February of this year. A persistent 2-month data lag poses risk to early detection, and corrective actions are now underway with our digital colleagues. So in conclusion, the service shows continued improvement, strengthening clinical leadership, sustained progress on safety indicators and high compliance in mandatory training. Key challenges include data timeliness, induction delays and upcoming national investigation pressures, all of which have active mitigation. The board is asked to receive and approve the report for assurance, and I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
Any questions on the maternity update report? Scott?
Thanks, Sally. It's not necessarily a question, but just to draw the board's attention on page 50 to paragraph 3, the board will recall, rightly asking that when we reorganised from the 5 care groups to the 3 divisions on the 1st of April, could we provide assurance that as we move to having the medicine, emergency care and children's division and the surgery and families division, that in that overlap of those 2 that we would have satisfactory perinatal leadership? And that was the right question. And I think so certainly, day to day and in the kind of operationally, the exec team are confident around that. But just seeing it in the paper that kind of formalisation of, we absolutely do have a perinatal leadership team. Those are the posts that are in that, and that it's got a line into the governance in both divisions, and that governance comes then centrally from ward to board is reassuring. So it's worth us noting that, because that was not a concern, but it was an appropriate question at the start, and I think we can answer that pretty robustly.
Thank you, Scott. Sarah?
Thank you. I don't have a question, but we did consider these papers at Quality Assurance Committee before Christmas, and it was just a couple of points that I wanted to add to what Alison's presented today. The first one, which I don't think you mentioned, Alison, but I think it's a good point to pull out, is that the National Maternity Survey results have been published and are no longer under embargo, and UHMBT came fourth nationally, which is a tremendous achievement for the teams. So I think it's really important that we recognise that. So that's really great. The other thing that we did pick up for looking at the reporting on incidents. So we're reassured because we receive a breakdown of the levels of deprivation of mums or families where there are incidents relating to maternity and neonatal. And on one level, we're reassured because they cross all of the 8 indices of deprivation. But actually, when you dig a little bit deeper, 2/3 of them actually are for the 2 poorest indices, or the highest indices of deprivation. And so we discussed this a little bit at Quality Assurance Committee. Because the numbers are so low, it's not possible to, on a monthly basis or a sort of bi-monthly basis, sort of look at themes or any actions around those. But what will be pulled out, Chris Chiswell updated us that as part of the health inequalities work, that's something that we can look at, sort of how we aggregate the data over a longer period of time to look at themes and look at what we're doing. On one level, it's reassuring that we're not out of alignment with national trends and reporting on this, but actually that's the reason we're supposed to focus on health inequalities, because we need to reduce that gap. So I just thought that was a helpful additional update to provide around the maternity reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on the maternity report? If not, are we happy to receive and approve that report for assurance? Yep. We then turn to the Maternity Incentive Scheme Year 7 report. Alison.
Thank you. So this paper provides the Trust's final position on compliance with the NHS Resolution Maternity Incentive Scheme Year 7. The scheme requires trusts to demonstrate achievement of 10 safety actions to recover the maternity CNST contribution and access additional rebates. So last year in Year 6, the Trust achieved 10 out of 10 safety actions, securing a rebate of just over 261k, which has been used to support safety improvements within maternity services. So the current Year 7 position, for which the reporting period closed on the 30th of November 2025, shows that the Trust will be declaring 9 out of 10 safety actions being achieved. Unfortunately, Safety Action 1 PMRT is partially compliant due to the delayed submission of one PMRT case to Embrace, while the sole reporter was unavailable for 2 months due to a coronial inquest earlier this year. Immediate remedial actions have been taken, which include monthly compliance monitoring to Divisional Quality Group and bi-monthly reporting to Trust Board and Safety Champions. 2 additional team members have been trained in PMRT investigation and Embrace reporting, removing the single point vulnerability. A full action plan has been developed and escalated to both NHS Resolution and Embrace. The full evidence folder for CNST Year 7, the action plan and the self-declaration form have all been circulated to the board for trust sign-off. NHS Resolution will review the circumstances in March of this year and may consider the situation as an extenuating circumstance, enabling potential eligibility for the full Year 7 rebate. I am aware that a similar issue occurred last year at another trust within the ICB, and following review from NHSR, they were awarded full compliance. All other safety actions 2 to 10, are compliant. So in terms of risks and mitigations in relation to Year 7 standards, we've got Safety Action 1 with partial compliance due to the PMRT delay and the action plan which has been implemented. The neonatal workforce is partially compliant with BAPM standards, but is mitigated through an agreed risk tracked action plan. And the RCOG compensatory rest standard is not fully met, but this falls outside the MIS scoring and is being addressed internally. Therefore, the board is asked to note the Year 7 position and associated risks and approve submission of the MIS declaration of 9 out of 10 compliance with the accompanying action plan for Safety Action 1, please.
Thank you. Alison, any questions from members of the board? Sarah?
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I think it's appropriate as Chair of Quality Assurance Committee that I sort of just reinforce for the board that all of the reports that are contained in the appendix that's been circulated have been considered at Quality Assurance Committee. The compliance with 9 out of 10 safety actions was flagged to us at the point at which it became clear that we weren't going to meet that first one, but as Alison says, with the mitigating plan in place. And similarly, we know that the 2 action plans on other safety actions enable us to remain compliant with those as long as we continue to progress the action plans. So I just want to confirm from a Quality Assurance Committee point of view that we have reviewed and considered all of the papers for submission, so we can recommend that they're supported.
Thank you, Sarah. Very useful and informative. If there are no further contributions, Alison, can I thank you for attending at short notice and thank the team for everything they do on our behalf.
Thank you.
We'll now turn to item 98, the Integrated Performance Dashboard, the report on month 7. So I will ask Interim Chief Exec Scott to take it over.
Thank you, Chair. Individual exec colleagues will cover this. Conscious we've got 35 minutes for the agenda item, so exec colleagues are sick of me banging on about we've got about 5 minutes per quadrant. If we want to do 20 minutes, to allow 15 minutes for the inevitable questions. So I will hand over in order to Lynn and Helen first for quality and safety.
Yes, so I'll make a start. I'll just pick out 3 items from the executive overview. I take pressure ulcers and falls together. So although you've got the numbers there, we have got a concern around the number of pressure ulcers that seem to be increasing. Certainly, long stays in ED, and particularly in orthopaedics, where we feel that that's contributing. Some frail patients coming through with fractured neck of femur, long waits in ED, and then several days later developing pressure damage, and we've got some actions around that and a change to the assessment, so making all those patients high risk when they come through to the orthopaedic ward. Duty of candour, we've got an improving trajectory, although we still have some outside of the 10-day window. At the last board, I talked about the Ulysses update that would resolve this situation. That's now complete, and that update provides evidence that the second duty of candour is sent to the family or the patient. We've just recently had an MIAA Kirkup recommendation report, which shows moderate assurance, and it specifically mentions duty of candour. That's the moderate assurance for that. But with the improvements in place, we feel that addresses the concern. And then just to go back to the PSERV, I'll give you it's an updated position, so it's slightly different numbers, but I think it's important to talk about where we are with PSERV now rather than 2 months ago. So we have commissioned 34 patient safety investigations to date. 12 have been completed and signed off at the Learning Response Group with the ICB. The 5 were commissioned, but then alternative reviews agreed. So they were removed from the process as that was felt more appropriate. We signed 2 off in December and a further 1 commissioned. We have 15 overdue, and 5 of those were at divisional sign-off. The divisions, particularly medicine, MECs, are really struggling with capacity to get those signed off. And we have 1 due to go to Learning Response Group, and 1 re-presentation to go to Learning Response Group, so that there'll be a further 2 signed off within the next few weeks. And that's the latest update for PSERV.
So just to cover a couple of areas, so the venous thromboembolism assessment. So we can see an improvement from September 73.4 to 75.4. This is continuous quality improvement work that is ongoing. We had a trajectory that was set by the Quality Assurance Committee by November to get to 80%. By the end of November, on the 24th, we had got to 80.4%. So there is continued improvement being made. That's being done through a number of areas in terms of e-learning, through quality improvement. It's a project that's happening, and we can see the breakdown between MECs who are ahead of the curve, and we're sharing that good practice across our other two divisions. We expect there to be continued progress. There's a new form that's just been done looking at local anaesthetic, which will make it easier for our clinicians to complete. And we've taken a lot of feedback from our clinicians to make this as easy as possible. We're just doing a cohort risk assessment in cardiology, looking at whether or not exceptions could be made. And we're not doing that without any kind of risk assessment. So we're just waiting the outcome of that. And we've made it very, very clear, I have as CMO, that there are going to be no exceptions around this. It's a national mandatory requirement. I've had a number of correspondence where the suggestion is that departments may be exempted. That's not happening, and yet we're continuing to see improvement in completion. Coming on to mortality, so our SHMI, or summary hospital level mortality indicator, continues to increase. That has increased. We have been previously green under 100. And you can see there on the report at 124, that has increased further. We've obviously looked at this in a lot of detail. We report through in terms of mortality to the Quality Assurance Committee, but also within our other committees around mortality steering group and triangulation. And this is related to the reduction in coding, which then gives us less expected deaths. We haven't seen an increase in observed deaths. It is due to a reduction in our expected deaths. And we are doing work to look at how we can remedy our current position in terms of coding.
Thank you very much. In Ali Balson's absence, Rebecca Coombs kindly joined us as Deputy Chief People Officer for the people domain. So anything more to pull out specifically, Rebecca, thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, just a couple of things, please. So firstly, around flu vaccinations, the final reported figure for us was 57.3%, which put us as highest in our system and also in the Northwest region. So really a positive result for us there. And taking the metrics as read in the paper, I was going to just highlight a couple of issues around our interest and pieces around the colleague experience agenda, if that's okay. So we're seeing a growing interest in improving team health and team relationships. Thinking about our people management development programme, which is national award winning, I might add. We've had 354 attendees on that so far. 107 of those have attended our Culture Day, which is about how we support teams through change. So really good results there. And we're seeing an increase in team-specific requests around inclusion, so particularly anti-racism and neurodiversity, which again is really positive and encouraging. We're also seeing a real interest from teams around our TED tool. I think everyone will have heard of that one. We talk about this a lot at the executive performance reviews as well, and the importance of using this tool around team culture. We know that there are barriers to that because it does require a time commitment, both for the attendance at the programme and then to do the work and carry out the tool in teams. So we recognise that. And finally, the OD team are getting an increasing number of requests for support with restorative conversations, particularly in complex areas. So in response to that, in our people leadership development programme, we're building a module which will equip managers with the skills they need around early resolution and restorative conversations, with a view to being able to deal with emerging issues in teams and deal with issues early rather than waiting until they get complex and then require intervention from the OD teams. So I'll probably leave it there if that's okay, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. In Helen Cobb's short-term absence today, our turnaround director, Paul Kane-Renshaw's kindly agreed to summarise the finance numbers, which are on page 126 of the pack. Paul?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Scott. Okay, so the month 8 actual position is a £1.1 million deficit against a plan of 100k surplus. So that's an adverse variance of 1.2 million in the month, that month 8. Cumulatively, that's a month 8 position of 11.5 million deficit against a planned deficit of 3.3 million. So an 8.2 million adverse to plan year to date. The month 8 forecast outturn is 4.3 million, and that will require the delivery of 9.9 million of mitigations, of which 4 million remains high risk. And this was previously reported at 6 and has been de-risked to 4 between months 8 and 9. Within that 4 million, the two material components of the risk are £2 million related to divisional recovery, which is closely aligned to both activity and the financial performance of the divisions, but also £1.5 million of enhancements, which are related to balance sheet optimisation opportunities. At the last IAG, PwC offered to support a desktop review of these, and that work has been underway in the previous month. Carrying on into WRFIP. So WRFIP is the primary driver of the in-month and the cumulative deficit position, with 2.3 million delivered in month against a target of 3.3 million in month 8. Year to date, WRFIP is 8.7 million adverse to plan. You can see a direct correlation to the year to date financial position in those numbers. At month 8, 16.2 million has been transacted, and the forecast is a risk adjusted delivery of 21.7 million, which unrisk adjusted is circa 24 million in total. That will deliver a 29.7 or circa 30 million full year effect in 26-27. So that means there is a shortfall at this time of £8.5 million against the in-year plan of 32.5, which you will recognise. The remaining risks in WRFIP relate to potential AVT procurement slippage, but that's quite a low risk in the sort of £150,000 kind of area. Obviously, the material risk is the beds and the completion of that work ASAP. They had already been risk adjusted to commence mid-January. So hopefully we're only in the realms of weeks of slippage based on that risk assessment. So in that context, the last thing I'll cover is the cash position. The latest assessment indicates that cash support will now be needed in March if LPM funds are not received. If LPM funds are not received, this will create a £9 million cash pressure in March. However, recent communication from the region indicate that we have an opportunity in the month 9 IAG review to obtain a more favourable position, which could release those funds to us, and that would be to the tune of 2.755 million per month if those funds are received. If the trust receives those funds, there will be no cash issue in March.
Oh, thank you. If I may just add to that quadrant, and you would know this probably just because it's public board. So IAG is our Improvement and Assurance Group. Our WRFIP is our Waste Reduction and Financial Improvement Scheme. AVT, Ambient Voice Technology, and LPM, the Local Price Modification. The thing to add then is the within the comprehensive detail that Paul described, we are it's I guess we call it rather corporately mitigation. Those mitigations are significant and challenging, and as I said in my opening piece, the impact that has on the organisation, whether that's in terms of the number of staff we have, the rates we pay our staff, and our bed base, is significant. So we'll continue to be transparent, communicate well around that. We are working very closely with our colleagues from staff side who are important in the space with us. Obviously, our staff side colleagues are there to represent the interests of their members, our staff, but we're having positive, at least fortnightly dialogue with our colleagues from staff side as we continue what will be a difficult quarter four for mitigating the financial challenge that we do have. And then finally coming on to what if I achieve nothing else here, we will stop calling operational performance and we'll call access, because it's about access to services, not how we perform. So D, access.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll take the detail as read, and just to note, this is the October data that this pack refers to. So a few areas just to highlight. So our emergency department 4-hour performance, as it says there, we're the 4-hour standard remaining common cause variation for the 12th month at 73%. There are a number of improvement actions that are focused on the front door or our ED departments, and we're ranking 52nd out of 121 national trusts in October. And UHMB is first out of 11 trusts within our peer group. The other few areas I want to highlight is specifically diagnostics. So we've really struggled in terms of our diagnostics performance for a number of months. But in October, we have achieved 3%, delivering both the national target, which is 5%, so we're below that, and the internal trajectory for the second month. And it really is excellent testimony to the hard work that the division have undertaken to achieve this performance and sustain it. Out of all large providers, we benchmarked 14th nationally out of 114 trusts, and we're second out of 11 trusts within our peer group. The elective care, I just want to refer to the 65-week waiters, as there were 3 patients who waited longer than 65 weeks for treatment in October. And just to note that from the 21st of December, there's going to be 0 tolerance for 65 weeks in month breaches, and they will not be nationally permitted. So it's just to note that. Just to finish off, our 2-hour urgent community response continues to comfortably achieve the 70% target. And finally, in relation to stroke performance, which is on page 187 of the pack, the new SNAP data set does not correlate with the old data set. We are assured that nationally we are within the average with details regarding actions on that page on the pack, and we have discussed this in board and various committees previously. All I want to make reference to. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions on the integrated performance dashboard? Who would like to kick us off? As I can see no hands, I will bring in at my discretion Ben.
Hi, thank you. So more comments than questions. Firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge what Scott said about the work with staff side on the financial turnaround. I think all parties involved have found those fortnightly meetings rather beneficial, and while it's been very difficult conversations, I think the level of mutual respect and understanding has been a sign of how we need to continue to work going forward. So I want to just personally thank Scott for facilitating those. With regards to the finances, I'd be remiss not to make the board aware that staff are getting increasingly concerned about the trust actually having the money to pay them. And I know Helen has touched on that in these sessions we've touched on and said, you know, it may get to a point where we have to start missing payments to our creditors to be able to pay our staff. So that is a concern to me, especially now what we're hearing about the LPM as well. So, you know, I think staff need that constant reassurance that they are actually going to get paid for turning up to work, even if it sounds repetitive. They want to know that. I also want to echo Rebecca's sentiments around the TED. I think it's an excellent tool. I personally have referred the team into areas with my members and seen a real positive benefit to that. So I would echo Rebecca's sentiments, and wherever possible, we should be utilising that. And then the last comment I just wanted to make was I was a little surprised reading the paper to see that the BAME network chairs attending the Anti-Racist Cumbria was actually funded by charities. I thought for an organisation that's on a journey to being anti-racist, appreciating the financial position, that we as an organisation would be funding that. You know, I know Paul and Amal are doing great work with the anti-racism group. So it just surprised me that charities funded that. And I think it goes back to a discussion we've had in those fortnightly financial turnaround meetings of being more transparent about what BAE Charities money is being used for and when, and how people can regularly access that information. I think we just need to be more transparent about what we're using that money for. But thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any reflections?
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and thank you for the mutual acknowledgement of the way we're trying to do business in difficult times. The point you make, I absolutely can see. So the concern around paying staff is, so we will absolutely continue to reassure our staff that we will be paying them. And what that means, of course, is we will face in our cash position difficulties around how we prioritise the payment to suppliers, but we must keep offering reassurance to staff around their monthly salaries. Of course we must. Your point around the Black and Minority Ethnic Network chairs, who I meet monthly with as the sponsor of that network. I don't know the detail, but it's a point well made. If we do have the networks and the chairs are good enough to give of their time, and I certainly know they do way above the time that we give them, then there needs to be a quid pro quo there. So I'll take that offline. And then the point, I think you raised it maybe at the last meeting we did have with staff side and the exec team around the kind of transparency around how the charity monies are deployed. That they're absolutely, and I think Louise has taken an action that we will bring back to staff side and other fora how we deploy the charity money. So I think the points are all well made.
Thank you, Scott. Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for the updates. My question was around finance, actually. So a couple of questions. One is, Paul referred to the fact that the local price modification income is being withheld at the moment, and I would like to understand the rationale for why it's being withheld if it was previously agreed, particularly as it potentially, as Ben's already highlighted, has the potential impact of us not being able to pay our staff. And then the second question relates to the high risk element of the savings that need to be found. I think, Paul, you talked about £4 million being at high risk, which related to divisional recovery, enhancements on the balance sheet, etc. Given we're already, and I know that it's sort of retrospective reporting, but given we're now in Q4, we're already in month 10. Realistically, where are we in terms of delivering on the high risk and indeed all of those programmes that we need to deliver on to come into the budget that we have committed to coming in on? Thank you.
I'll take the first. Thank you, Sarah. I'll take the first one and defer to Paul for the risk profile on the second one. On the first one, the local price modification monies are wrapped up in a bundle with what's more broadly called the deficit support funding for the system, and the flow of the deficit support funding is contingent on the advice of the IAGs to NHSE about their level of confidence in financial delivery, i.e. after the 5 IAGs, the team conducting those will give advice to NHSE on their level of confidence around delivery, and should they not have the confidence they wish, then there's a view taken on the deployment of deficit support funding. So after the round of IAGs the round of IAGs that related to month 7, there was limited confidence, and so the deficit support funding was withheld. We have a communication from colleagues at the region that the month 8 IAGs were in a different place, and so when we go to IAG next week, if that remains on track, then there's an increased level of confidence that deficit support funding will flow again back, and it will be retrospective. So a lot of words to say. It's based on level of confidence around delivery, wrapped up in the DSF, and we will seek after this round of IAGs that flows back. The second question around the risk profile, just to disentangle one, then, so before I come to Paul, is as at this reporting period, we're reporting a most likely case scenario deficit of £4.3 million. The rightful ask of the turnaround team and the IAG environment is that that's reduced further, which of course we'll endeavour to do, but we are being transparent around the most likely case of 4.3 deficit. And to achieve the 4.3 deficit, there is some high risk in there, which was £6 million. We now believe to be £4 million. But Paul can unpack that 4 million for us if you would, Paul.
Yeah, certainly. So most materially, I mentioned two numbers. So 2 million in divisional roadmaps and 1.5 in the balance sheet enhancements. So within the divisional roadmaps, these are their recovery plans, and they are combined mitigations for under delivery of WR FIP or the savings program, but also quite materially addressing and recovering overspending cost centres. Now, at the moment, there are circa £8 million of overspends in cost centres across the business. Now, they are to some effect balanced by surpluses in other cost centres within the same divisions. However, the situation we are in is we can't accept the normal conditions that are, okay, you're going to achieve an overall balanced budget. There may be good reasons and reasons which can be reversed for the overspends in those cost centres, and therefore we should pursue them. The divisions have responded very well to this challenge. We've supported this challenge with communications to individual budget holders, advising them that they need to recover their positions to the best possible place, or unfortunately, we would need to discuss their non-compliance with standing financial instructions. So this is a very, very serious application of good financial governance into the trust. So if we have £2 million in the plan that we want to achieve through that work, we're aiming for a much higher figure in order to deliver that. However, it remains high risk, and it's certainly high risk in the current operational context. The divisions are working very hard to deliver savings, improve, recover, and do the day job. And that's quite a challenge on them. So there is the risk therein. With regards to the balance sheet, very quickly, so that's 1.5 million of enhancements. It has been identified as high risk by our auditors. It does not mean that it will not be delivered, but with PwC's help, perhaps we will be able to de-risk that through the identification of other balance sheet optimization opportunities. So they are high risk, but they are certainly deliverable. And in terms of the ratings of the entire roadmap, those are the only ones which we consider to be high risk. I hope that's a helpful summary.
Thank you. Sarah, anything you'd like to come back on?
Thank you. Yeah, one a quick one with Scott, which was Scott, on that comment about the local price modification. So is the decision based on our performance as a trust or on the performance of the 5 trusts in the system? I wasn't quite sure if it was wrapped up in wider performance or just ours on the financial roadmap.
It's the system, Sarah.
Okay, so it's not entirely within our gift or our hands, if you like, to address that.
Other than us being the best of ourselves, then
Yeah.
it's a system assessment.
Okay, thank you. And I think just the other question to Paul then, just on the point around the auditors identifying, sorry, those items that need to be worked through on the balance sheets. What's the timeline for that, Paul, in terms of reporting back to board?
We should expect, Sarah, that PwC will be able to give us a view by the next IAG, so that's next week.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to bring a position on the risk of that to, in that IAG update and in that IAG briefing, you should be aware. So it won't need to be until the next board report.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for public record, it's just important to say that we've had ample opportunity to ask questions specifically about a range of things in this report. So I don't want that lack of inquiry to be interpreted as though lack of interest, because it hasn't, and particularly around the finance space. So thanks for that, Paul. But however, 2 other things. One is with observation on the mixed sex accommodation. I know I asked this question over a year ago, and I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but I'm wondering if we can have this measure tied up with the not meeting criteria to reside. Because primarily the reasons why we're not offering the choice that people from a gender point of view should receive is because of basically too much demand and not sufficient capacity. And it would be really nice to see some correlation between that, because it's not just about the money and the capacity, it's also about clinical quality and safety for patients. So just to make that point. The second one, there's some brilliant stuff in it, but it's for Rebecca around appraisals, because this has been flatlining for quite a while. And it's been described that we're going to see improvement, but if I've read the numbers right, we're still around 73 in terms of appraisal. It would be useful to know how many people out of our staff from that approximately 7,000 that meet, because it could be quite a small number according to how it's configured, or it could be a significant number. I can't kind of get a sense of that. So it's one, what is it proportionally? Number two, when can we expect to see that number start to kind of improve?
Rebecca, can you answer the point on appraisals?
I can answer part of that point. I can't answer the point in terms of the number of employees that equates to. I'd have to get that for you. But in terms of the trajectory, this is part of the exec performance reviews that we have, and each division does have a plan to reach the needed target for appraisals by a given point in time. So it is under scrutiny in that forum. I can give you that assurance.
Chair, thanks, Rebecca. It doesn't really give me assurance. That's just a process. I suppose the point is it'd be really helpful to understand when.
Okay.
In what areas, because at the minute when you read this, it could be about a clinical group, it could be about a divisional group, it could be about a professional group, it could be a corporate. I don't quite understand what the blockage is, and because it's been going on for some time, it could be a process type issue as well. I just don't know. So whether it's to the People's Committee or whether it's an email behind the scenes, it'd just be helpful to get a bit of clarification, Rebecca. So thank you.
Okay, no problem, Tony. Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on mixed sex accommodation, Lynn?
Yeah, so there is a direct correlation between delayed transfers out of ICU. All of these MSA breaches are delays out of ICU for people who are ready to go to the ward but can't. Lancaster's a problem. It's got 2 side rooms and they will be utilised for other purposes. We had seen an improvement in the last month at FGH because of their change to their layouts and level of critical care beds. They've been able to provide more side rooms. So we started to see the number coming down at FGH, but it will be an ongoing problem at Lancaster.
That's brilliant, Lynn. So can we get that built into the not me? It's just another little quality clinical indicator. Say, look, things are beginning to look a bit more effective because we're managing the capacity.
We can do that. Yeah, we report sort of externally about MSA breaches, and it's over a month. So that's how we do that with MSA breaches. Thank you.
Thanks. Keith.
Yeah, it's just a quick question for Lynn. Sorry, Lynn, to bring up it's the PSERV question, and it's an update on the no learning response post, but they were due in December. That was just to see how progress was going.
So I should have said that. So we have interviewed in December. We've filled all 3 posts. One of the people that are going into that post is already in the governance team and is skilled in PSERV, so we'll transfer on the 16th. Yeah. There are 2 other people that we put into post, one on maternity leave, who will come back in February, March, but will need training, and an internal candidate who also needs training. So we've still got the skilled bank staff who are actually doing a fabulous job at really good quality, and actually good quality PSIs, and at least one of them that used to be one of our employees has sort of set the template for how the PSI should be done. So we'll continue with that bank cover until they're up to speed, because we can't set it back. And the other thing just to point out is that we are commissioning less PSIs because we are getting more skilled at PSERV and the alternatives to doing a patient safety investigation.
All right, thanks. Thank you. If there are no further questions from members of the board, I will use my discretion to once again bring in Ben.
I just want to echo Tony's sentiments around the appraisals, and I think the People Committee will be a good forum to bring that in. But I would just not caution the board, but maybe recommend to the board that we don't put the focus solely on the numbers of completed appraisals, but keep the focus on the value of the appraisals, because we could easily get them all ticked off. But the question is whether they're actually of any substance or the use or the benefit of those appraisals. I think that needs to be at the forefront, because I think there's many people who do their appraisals who don't see the value of it. So I think we need to be careful when we measure those KPIs in not just the completion rate, but actually the value added by doing that.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Well, if there are no further comments or questions on this, we'll move on to the 3A reports from the Assurance Committees. The first report that has been circulated is from the People Committee on the 3rd of November and the 15th of December. Conscious that the Chair of the People Committee, Karen Deany, has sent her apologies. Mike, can I ask you to say a few words?
Yeah, so there's two reports. The November meeting was truncated because of the train derailment at Shap. Karen and the team moved everything necessary into the December meeting, which made for a busy meeting in December, but everything necessary was covered. There was one alert that Karen asked me to bring out, and it was that the sexual safety policy has not yet been approved, and that the actions that should be noted are on the Chair's report. In the Chair's report for December, say busy meeting but very productive. There's the alert around the job matching process and consistency checking. That's not been completed as yet, so the committee will monitor that. And we've had an update today on the DBS being signed off, and as of today we've got 6 members of staff who are progressing through a disciplinary recommendation. So I'll take it as read.
Thank you, Mike. I go through all 4 reports and then ask for any questions on any of them. So the Finance and Performance Committee next, the report of the 17th of November and 15th of December. Amin.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just focus the essence of time just on the last report, which was from 15th of December. So without reiterating, Paul has just taken us through a number of measures that remain a challenge, namely the target for break-even to plan, the cost savings, the WRFIP initiatives as well, and the cash position. So I won't go on those too much, but those remain an alert as far as 3A's report is concerned. In terms of some things I'd like to draw your attention to is on the advice section. There has been some noted operational performance in terms of positivity, in terms of diagnostics, as Dee mentioned, and also on some of the cancer performance measures as well. We've also had some positive progress made on the not meeting criteria to reside as well. We've got some really good insights now that give us indications of where and how we can potentially seek those improvements that we're looking for in that area. So that was noted. And then in terms of assurance, there is the update from the Lancashire Cumbria Pathology Service as well. That is due to go live 1st of April, a slight delay, but it's one that makes sense in terms of timings and the due diligence process as well. So that is happening and on target, so a lot of assurance on that. Other than that, nothing really else to add.
Thank you, Amin. We now turn to the Transformation and Improvement Board meeting on the 22nd of December. Tony?
Okay.
Oh, Keith.
Yeah, I'm just where I need to be. Yeah, thank you, Tony. Yeah, so the main issues for the TIB on the 22nd December were to alert on the gynecology programme. The Trust is still awaiting confirmation of capital funding from NHSE to purchase the Bugatti equipment. This equipment is required to enable movement of theatres into outpatient setting. The other alert was the Ambient Voice Technology Programme. TIB noted that the AVT programme maintained was in amber due to forecast delays and approximately 6 to 8 weeks. There were some positives to note regarding Workstream 1 and the progress that's being made in this area, which was received positively by the group. And as this was my first meeting and first opportunity to chair, I'll keep it short and take it the minutes have been read by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. And then finally, the Quality Committee meeting on the 22nd of December. Sarah.
Thank you. I'll do my best to keep it short, but as colleagues who attend that meeting know, it's a very full agenda and we cover a lot of ground in it. There are a couple of alerts. One alert I wanted to pull out, two really. So one relates to potential risk of deterioration in our NHS oversight framework status. We've talked about the fact we're currently at segment 3, but actually in terms of the reports we've received at committee, there are a few things driving performance which potentially put us at risk, I think. So one is our internal scoring against the segments, which suggests 2 divisions are scoring as a segment 4 in it and 1 division scoring as segment 3, and that's based on certainly the reports we received of recent performance and accountability review meetings, which we received in December. We noted as well the impact of emergency department performance challenges, and the other key area which is contributing is the one Helen mentioned earlier, in terms of mortality, and the fact we have now both our mortality indicators at red, which are reported nationally, because of the uncoded activity. So I think it's really important to be aware of those things, in particular to note the ongoing impact of the coding delays. There's another piece of update in the report which is also impacted by coding delays, which is around infection prevention. We received the quarterly infection prevention report, which broadly was a positive and a comprehensive report, but actually we were unable to submit surgical site information surveillance data to the national database for the Q1, which was April to June, and we're unlikely to be able to submit it for Q2, which is July to September. We only have to submit for 1 quarter, but at the moment there's a risk to us being able to achieve that within the time frame. So that's another risk that's emerging related to the delays in coding, which I think it's important that we're aware of. In terms of points to advise, we discussed briefly at private board that we were aware of a recent safety walkabout where there were a number of patients all cohorted on 1 ward with deprivation of liberty orders, and there were some challenges in terms of ensuring care within that space, and so we received an update on that, which I'm providing to board to advise. So although we noted that the issue was primarily being driven by external care setting capacity, this is not something that's likely to be resolved in the near future, so it's an ongoing challenge. However, the divisional team's been asked to provide a response and some actions to support the patients and the ward, and there is now an escalation process in place for ward staff concerns, as well as some plans to improve the environment within the ward space as well. So I'll provide that update for the board. In terms of other points, we did receive an update on the speech and language therapy service, and we've been advised that gaps have been identified around lack of video fluoroscopy equipment at a site, which is obviously impacting for patients. So there's work ongoing with the Chief Nursing Officer leading to address those issues, and we've agreed that a further update would come to the next meeting of Quality Assurance Committee. And just a couple of final points. In terms of assurance, we received an update on progress with responding to an action plan which was developed following an invited review by the Royal College of Paediatrics and Children's. Substantial progress is being made against that plan, although some of the actions are very complex, but there are measurable improvements being shown, and we'll expect a further update on that in April. And then finally, we also considered an update regarding the single pathology service for Lancashire and South Cumbria. We are supportive of continuing to proceed with that transfer in the single pathology service, but we have asked for some additional governance work, and also some assurance around scenario planning for incidents which may occur, which relate to take place on our site for estates that are managed through one LSC and for services that are delivered through the pathology service. We want to make sure that we've got clear sort of line of sight on how that will be overseen, and that's the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions, or are we happy to just note the 3A's reports? Okay, noted. We'll move on to item 9 on the agenda, the medium-term planning update. Carlin.
Thank you. So I'll just give the highlights, but more kind of focus in sort of 5 minutes about the next steps, because we're at quite a critical point in the process. So as outlined in the paper, following approval from Finance and Performance Committee, we submitted our first draft plan on the 16th of December. And as described, that was representative of the point that we had reached at that point within our defined methodology for doing our plan. So in summary, that reported compliance with the financial target of a break-even control total, and all of the performance requirements, with the exception of 2, which are the 4-hour UEC standard, and also the ask to improve 18-week performance to 82% by March 27, with ultimately the goal to return to the constitutional standard of 92 by March 29. At this point in time, we've not received any key lines of inquiry back from NHS England, which I would note as being quite unusual within our planning round. Although this is a very different planning round, we are submitting multiple year returns at this point. And also this year, we're submitting them as individual organisations. They've not gone via the ICB as a system. So I would probably imagine from the ability to do some of that rapid intelligence, that's quite challenging. So we're now in a very intense period within planning, working towards what is still being regarded as our final submission on the 11th of February. That is the final date, and we have to really work backwards. This has to go through board, and I'll summarise the kind of critical key dates that we will all discuss this in more detail. But we are still not in receipt of what actually are some really critical pieces of information for us to be able to complete, although we are working very constructively and engaging almost daily with the ICB on this. So our 2 pieces of information which are now becoming quite critical points are clarification of the funding allocations, so our contract value, because that will ultimately define the level of activity and performance that we are able to deliver. But linked to that, I think working together as a system about the mitigations to affordability, so specifically around demand management, but also transformation. What is very clear from the national team, and I think we see that in the 10-year plan, this is us delivering strategy, is this isn't about just doing the same, this is about doing things differently. So there is quite a bit to happen, I would say, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks for them planning teams, finance teams, and workforce teams to be able to complete the necessary documents at that point. I'll just highlight sort of key points, touch points for the board. We do have a discussion on this on a session on the 14th of January, but I'd suggest that is more just allowing us time to really just take stock of the scale of the challenge that we will need to submit, and potential risks that we would need to be aware of and potentially make decisions around. But I think where we'll bring back some more substance and the detail and where we've got to around the mitigations will be on the 4th of February. And I'll also bring to the board at that point our draft 5-year integrated delivery plan. So that's our work document, which will support the numerical returns and describe all of the change that will deliver the plan, and also an update on the board assurance statements. I think just before opening up to questions, the plan is quite historically, it's traditionally about numbers, it's about templates, but actually just reminding ourselves, this is about how we're going to deliver our services and fundamentally the opportunity to do that differently. So I just did want to make a brief comment to the work that's already ongoing, and it will go to the Transformation and Improvement Board in February to set out our priority, our complex, our high impact, high value change and transformation initiatives, which will ensure that we deliver our plan. So we are already starting work already within Q4, so that we have confirmed delivery plans, quantified delivery plans in change and sustainability, so that we can de-risk some of the asks upon us when we get to April of this year. And I'm really happy to any points of clarity or any questions.
Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, just first of all, I want to say, Carlin, this is really good, because this is so complicated. And I think the way you've laid it out, the fact that we as a trust are beginning to think about what the new transformative pieces of activity work will look like, and looking at them in a very meticulous way in terms of quality, safety, finance is fundamentally right. So I feel assured or reassured to a point that we have got, I think, a really, as good as can be expected in all the vagaries and variable moving parts, a good grip on what the proposition may look like by the time we get to February. I suppose my question is more about us as a board, because it goes back to conversations we were having earlier today, which is this is not all within our control. In truth, I don't think it is about how do we think differently about system, and some of that's about that kind of cross integration piece, but it's also about the PCB world. So is there anything as a board we should be saying to help you and obviously Scott and the team to accelerate some of those conversations? Because to have a reasonably well-informed conversation in the timescales as they're beginning to look, it looks a tall order, and it requires a bit of appetite commitment from the centre, whether that's ICB or whether that's at PCB world. So can you give us a sense, or you want to go to Scott, I don't know, but just what you think you need from us as a board?
I mean, I will answer it. I don't, if you could allow me maybe more time to reflect, because that's a very helpful offer for all of us in the team. I think the real critical thing here, and I think this is a view that's shared by all of our acute providers, is about making sure that there's the appropriate spreading of the risk around planning, and maybe some reflections that the provider colleagues within the system have taken more of the risk within 25-26 than, as you say, we were able to control. So I think what's really important for us and for the board to support is when we understand the things which we require other people to do to help that transformation. Demand management would be my really critical one around that. None of us can afford, we don't want to have that volume of patients coming through, even if people want to pay us for it. That's not what we want to do. So I think as all, having that clarity about what's within our gift, what we do together, and what actually we need other people to support us with. And I think we actively, but in a collaborative way, have to be very clear in articulating what that is.
So just that's really helpful. So that's the bit I'm struggling with in terms of when and how will that begin to be articulated, and how, because if there's one thing, I suppose my experience of this system over the last 2 years has been it's good at putting the barriers up, and not being collectively committed to redesigning, re-engineering. So it's a really difficult question, but maybe it's more to Scott as well as the team in the chair. How and when will that start to emerge? Because there's got to be a commitment. If you look at One LSC as an example, a lot of effort, a lot of time to get us probably not very advanced as we'd want to be. So,
Scott, no, I agree, Tony. I do agree. I guess maybe tactically and then strategically. So tactically, the very complex machine that Carolyn describes will churn out what I'd roughly call a kind of a resource-based plan. So with a indicative financial allocation of X, we can achieve Y. And of course, that will map against the planning instructions and likely, as per the paper, evidence a gap. And I think it's incumbent on us then to acknowledge, to really stand kind of as a board to say, right, okay, well, that look where we are just now in Q3, Q4, and having to do some of the kind of mitigation stuff that we're doing. Unless we wish to sleepwalk into that again, we will have to be, I think, quite robust around a resource-based plan says that we can deliver that level of activity. And I think there is something for us as a board in that space. Within that, there's two challenges, isn't there? There's a challenge to ourselves about our own level of productivity. And it's important the board has the opportunity to challenge our productivity assumptions, because we must hold that mirror up to ourselves. And then secondly, to challenge the risks or the contingencies. And so Dee and Lynn and Helen presented earlier this morning the example that there are currently between 40 and 70 patients today in our hospitals who are awaiting a service outside the hospital that's not commissioned. And so there is something for us, we are commissioner and partners in that space to lay that bare. Not in a not in a adversarial way, but we need to lay bare that there are patients who are with us by dint of not having commissioned services somewhere else. And that's mainly with our commissioner by way of the ICB and the piece in the provider collaborative. I think you're right. I think there is a judgment for us to take. Well, absolutely. We've got a kind of mandatory obligation to be part of a provider collaborative, and rightly so. We wish to be part of a collaborative across our system. But in this space, there is something for us, and Andrew and I discussed this, and I'm sure as Steve as the incoming chief exec, similarly, to have a kind of certainly late Q4, early Q1 conversation in the provider collaborative that passes a test of, well, where does it come to life? Where does it impact on either running helps? In some ways it's very complex, in other ways it's very simple. You've got demand and you've got capacity. And so if we can't point to the added value of any of our collaborations impacting on demand or capacity, then there's an issue. So I think there's a commitment to have that drains up conversation with the provider collaborative. There's a commitment to hold a mirror up to yourself for productivity, and there's a commitment, and I can, you know, starting to feel the commitment back from the ICB around commissioning.
Okay, Mike. Yeah, and thank you for the paper, Carly. The press release yesterday from NHS Online, which was understandably news to me. When it comes to fitting that into our own planning, I'll call them aspirations as to what we're hoping to achieve, would something as big and as complex as that actually affect our planning? Referring back to what I said this morning, really, about doing a plan and then finding that the goalposts have moved massively.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, we would. We would if we were furnished with the, I suppose, specifics, the detail and assumptions around the impact and demand to then allow us as a board to determine our confidence in an external influencer. And then we could say, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. That national initiative looks to do this for our population. And we're really confident, and we absolutely would include it. I mean, in many ways, that's quite similar to us waiting on the receipt of the ICB's commissioning intentions. That's the same thing. Thank you for your contribution. We see the plans, absolutely. We will include that. None of us in the exec team have received that detail around the new online hospital. My sense may be that the national team might have included that already within their reduction in allocations to systems, although I'm speculating in saying that. But nationally, there is assumptions that there will already be some efficiencies before then we all ourselves have to do efficiencies.
And it was so basically, once again, we're waiting on decide to do what they decide to give us. Thanks. I mean,
yeah, Colin, obviously this came to finance performance, but I did have a question that has come to mind since this meeting, and it's more really regarding the waste reduction element of the plan. What is the intention in terms of identification of those plans? Are we going to do things differently? Because as the scope for potential becomes smaller, obviously different methods and approaches are maybe required. So for example, you know, the trust was £80 million deficit. As we now try to get towards break even, it becomes a bit more difficult. Right, so I'm very to try and identify those initiatives. So how are we encouraging colleagues and teams to come forward with things that are the unknown, if you will. And then the second thing is what is our approach to kind of a risk-based approach? Because again, this year through the IAG process, we'd identified a pipeline, but then that was risk adjusted. What is our approach to having something like that? And I think the third part, sorry, is that at the beginning of this fiscal year, we never really had a pipeline that was equal to or greater than the number that we were chasing. And I think we felt behind at that point. The belief always was that we would continue to identify programs that would get us there. So what is the kind of the approach to savings?
I will invite other colleagues. The creation of WRFIP it doesn't necessarily just solely sit with myself, but I will absolutely talk to the change in sustainability, which of course myself and my team are invested in, and that is one of many contributors and an important contributor to cost savings alongside other indicators. So I would absolutely sort of reiterate that our approach is going to be more bottom up and based on evidence, and I suppose just getting ahead of the game, being more prescriptive. So we absolutely, I think, would all agree that when we're doing assessments of opportunities, that we want to really make sure they're informed by data. And when we say that from a financial perspective, resisting the kind of risks around using benchmarking information such as model health, but actually doing things differently. So to bring that a little bit to life, actually, and so I'm not just talking theoretically. Within workstream 1, which Helen is the SRO, we picked some specialties this year, but we have a number of other specialties. If we were to say services who in 24-25 ran with the greatest deficit, we know what those specialties are. We've already identified those: urology, ENT, general surgery, and care of the elderly. And we're going to be holding quite robust workshops with real improvement methodologies that also brings in a degree of detail around finances as well, so that we can really engage our clinical, our operational sort of leadership excellence in these fields and allow them to use that information to say, I understand that opportunity, I understand the drivers to it, so that we can actually quite quickly define what the opportunities are, what we can take forward that's within our gift, what we can't. And then before we get to the end of April, actually cost that up using our own budgets, our own income assumptions as well. So that's, I think that's the one key tangible difference to bring that to life that I can talk about. But I'm of course just talking about change and sustainability, and that is not the singular solution. So I will just allow opportunities if anyone else wants to add to that.
There are so many unknowns in this, aren't there? And I think last year the context was sign off a plan, comply with the 4-test process, stretch that plan, and that inevitably resulted in the use of things like model hospital opportunity, etc., to be able to meet that stretching plan, but without it being devoid of any kind of science or something. You know, at least there was something that informed what was going after. I have a feeling with these unknowns that Carlin's describing, that the situation may be equally difficult this year, but that the tactic, which I think Scott referred to earlier, was being and holding the position that is, we are not going to try and fight right at the front end. Here is the, let's say, 12 million or 10 million that can be evidenced through the process that Carlin is describing. And here is the process by which we will continue that process of good evidence validation to create the plan going forward. I doubt that will be looked upon favourably. It's sensible, it's the right thing to do to avoid what's happened this year, but those above want a plan. They want it on time, they want it compliant, etc. So it would be bold and challenging, I think, for the trust and the board to take that position, but it's the right thing if that can be achieved. Scott may wish to add to it.
No, nothing more than that. Good. If we are all happy, therefore, to note the update to the medium-term planning.
That's great. I'm going to use my discretion, unless anyone strongly objects, to skip over the afternoon break, just because I think the 3 substantive items we're about to move on to can all be covered very quickly, that allow us to finish early to give a break before the 3 o'clock meeting when the board are meeting with the council governors. So that's why we're just going to skip the break. If everybody is happy, we'll move on to item 100, the provider collaboration update. Scott.
In that spirit, Chair, the items are in the paper. There was none that I was going to specifically pull out. I think the paper's comprehensive, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions on the provider collaboration update? If not, we'll move on to item 101, board assurance framework. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll keep this brief. What you see in the report that's in your pack is really a composite position of the kind of various issues, risks and challenges which have been captured through our assurance committees and indeed on today's board agenda. We'll track those through in terms of looking at the effectiveness of controls, mitigation and assurances in the next period through both our board assurance committees and through our governance and assurance frameworks. Perhaps just a couple of points that I want to pick out where I think we can add some additional value to the papers that you have circulated, you as a board of directors. Thank you, Paul, for the additional update regarding cash, which we kind of captured in there. I think it's important that we capture the narrative that you shared there. There was an early discussion today again regarding kind of 1LSC. I think, Tony, we need to kind of wrestle that through. Again, we've mentioned 1LSC, but I want to wrestle that one through. The other one, just to kind of, again, just catch on in the tail end of the report, we talk about urgent care and the declaration of Opal 4. At the time of writing, we've since then had a further declaration. Again, I just want to kind of emphasise the comments that Scott made earlier on about urgent and emergency care as well. So just some highlights from me. We did ask the assurance committees if there were any confidence in changing scores, moving towards our kind of target scores, but in the light of kind of the complexity and the challenging environment that we operate, there was a recommendation from all the committees that all the scores remain the same, and we would ask the board to support that. Happy to take any questions, Andrew.
Smashing. Any questions for Paul? If not, the recommendation is the board of directors asked to consider the contents of the report and approve the recommendations from the committees. All in favour? Yeah, good. We'll move on to item 102, the GMC survey annual report. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. I just want to highlight a couple of areas. Our completion response rate was above the national rate. You can see the trend analysis report, and also just from the previous GMC survey results, we had a number of areas requiring improvement, and as can be seen from point it's 2D, it's 2E, that due to the sustained improvements of the work of the team, those risks have now been closed. Just want to highlight in 3F to do with rheumatology, not considered in terms of the risks overall, as we've given, and I'll give that summary, but there was just a low level that we'll be managing and obviously continuing to work with the team on. In terms of overall, just there in terms of 5E, the department was pleased to confirm there are no risks identified for the trust within that survey. You can see within some of the themes that there are some issues in terms of, for example, around timings and things like that for our clinicians. Just to let you know that as part of a review looking at how we're doing job planning and thinking like service level job planning, and then planning to have things like the job planning consistency panel, we've started to look at what we're doing in terms of the payments that we're doing around the clinical leads, just to make sure that we've got that as sort of consistent and fair from the point of view of education and so forth. So we're working through that with one of my deputies, Dr. Hay. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions for Helen? Sarah.
Thank you, Helen. It's really helpful to see it. I don't know if it's the way I'm reading the paper or the way it's been presented, not by you, I mean the way it's presented as a paper. I suppose I don't read it and think, oh, we're really good at this. It reads like we're okay at it. And I don't know if that's just because of the snapshot of data that's been included, or whether that's the overarching position. So I suppose that leads me to two questions. Is there, and I know People Committee receives this and probably looks at it in more detail, but is there a bit more information we could be provided with that would help us to understand actually how good our medical education is compared with other providers of medical education? And then my second question would be in that space about, depending on what that does tell us, as I say, it might just be the snapshot doesn't look massively strong, is do we want to therefore improve the quality of our medical education? So yeah, that, because I can't quite get that from the paper.
Okay. So I'll certainly feed that back just so I can make sure, and obviously Marwan and I have regular catch-ups. So Marwan, the Director of Medical Education, and so is it strong? Yes, and we in terms of the delivery of education that we provide here at Morecambe Bay is actually very good. Obviously there are some areas there that you can see that are pink and red, where there's obviously areas that we need to concentrate on, and that's obviously highlighted around some of those areas in the paper. To have nowhere where we are beyond a 1, which was obviously the rheumatology department, is really positive. So maybe I should have said that in a bit more of a congratulatory way to the departments, because having gone from obviously several last year, we now have 1. That's obviously 1 more than we would want. But I can certainly feed that back. In terms of how we deliver education, no, it is really positive here at Morecambe Bay. It's just that we know that there's more that we can do, and we're continuing to work on that.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Helen. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, the Board of Directors is asked to recognise the positive outcomes achieved to date and note the action plans that are in place to monitor progress and address the areas requiring improvement. The National Health Service England Workforce Training and Education Quality Team will oversee the Trust progress through quarterly review meetings. We all happy with that? If we are, I will draw today's meeting to a close. The attendance at monitoring register has been circulated, as has the future schedule of business. I've not been notified of any urgent business. Very conscious of time, but is there any reflections anyone wants to make on how this meeting has gone today? If not, great, thank you. My door is always open if you want to provide reflection privately. The date, time and venue of the next meeting will be Wednesday the 4th of March at 9 AM here in the boardroom. Well, the time may change because it may be in the afternoon, so it will definitely be on Wednesday the 4th of March here in the boardroom at Westmoreland General Hospital, but also on Microsoft Teams. Thank you all very much for your attendance.
Thank you.